Hey there, I'm Ari from Tech Buyers Guru, and I wanted to break down all the news that I shared over the past week from CES 2020. Now, I was on the ground there for 3 days visiting every major manufacturer I could. They were spread out all over the city. They weren't just in one convention center, just so you realize what it's like to handle CES, particularly with all the PC manufacturers, nearly all of them off-site, like at various hotels, could be like 5 miles apart from each other. There were a lot of Uber rides. Anyway, I'm going to cut to the chase here. I think in some ways CES was really amazing this year for the PC industries, and in other ways it was a little bit disappointing. And I think it is a sign of things to come. So I'm actually just going to break this down by the product category, kind of like I did when I predicted what we were going to see at CES a couple weeks ago. And I'll be honest, I'm actually going to point out where I was wrong. There were a couple areas where I was dead wrong in terms of my predictions. I want to just come clean about that so you can see, like, hey, I don't have a magic 8 ball that tells me what's coming, but that's actually also a good thing, that there are a lot of surprises at CES, and that's the value of a show like this. So first up, CPUs. Well, actually not that big a surprise that AMD dropped its Threadripper 64 core 3990X. Not even that much of a surprise that the price point is right around $4,000, but kind of cheekily they priced it at $3990. It's coming out in February. I don't think it's that relevant to my audience. I don't think it's that relevant to most people, but it was being talked about a lot when I spoke to folks in the movie production industry. For instance, when I went over to the Samsung booth and they had some folks from the movie industry. Of course, they work very closely with movie and TV industry. And those guys are saying this is changing everything. The fact that you can pick up a Threadripper with 64 cores is going to change everything in terms of 8K movie production, which is now how they're going to be shooting a lot of stuff going forward. Not just 4K, but they're going to actually master on 8K. So 64 core Threadripper at $4,000 is a huge deal for the industry. It's not a huge deal for gamers. It's not a huge deal for people at home doing video production or other content creation, because $4,000 is $4,000. A lot of money, but it beats a $20,000 CPU solution from Intel. So hey, it's a huge win. AMD was really proud of its accomplishments, and for good reason. They were showing a lot of AMD pride at CES, and that's cool. I mean, they've just absolutely dropped a hammer on Intel. Intel did not release really anything at CES in terms of desktop CPUs. They were supposed to sample some motherboards for their latest 10-core CPUs and then pulled it right at the last minute. From what I read and hear, it's because, frankly, the power use is through the roof. They can't get the power under control on a 10-core CPU when they're running the 14-nanometer. So, 64-core, $4,000 CPU was basically the news at CES. Let's move on. Video cards. Not a lot of news here either. I was a little surprised that NVIDIA didn't say a word. There was not a peep from NVIDIA about anything. And I was actually shocked that AMD did not drop Big Navi, which would be the update to their RX 5700 XT. I am pretty confident they can double the size of that fairly easily and come out with a GPU at about $700 to $800 that at least matches the 2080 Ti. And they didn't do it yet. And Lisa Su did say, actually, in a question and answer session, you can expect Big Navi. And then she said, I don't usually comment on products that aren't released yet. So I think that says a lot. If the CEO is telling you Big Navi's coming, it's coming. I think they were probably a little disappointed they couldn't bring it out either. Instead, they had to have their exec come up during the press conference and make a huge deal out of the 5600 XT, this poor little $280 GPU. And I felt so bad for that exec having to stand up there and say, now the 5600 XT. And people were like, a $280 GPU that performs like a $200 GPU from NVIDIA last year. It's like 10% faster. I'm not impressed by the price point. That should have come in at $250. AMD has kind of goofed it up with their lower end GPUs coming in, filling it, kind of backfilling their product line with lower end GPUs at bad prices. I just don't get it. When they nailed the 5700 series, and then they blew it with the 5500 and 5600, especially at CES, they should have known better. So I'm a little disappointed in GPU news. Okay, moving on. I'm also a little disappointed in the motherboard news. I was sure that the B550 would be launched by AMD at CES. It's 6 months late at this point. All we have is X570, which is at the high end. B550 was going to make it so much easier to get modern features into a motherboard at a decent price point for users of the Ryzen 3000 series, which has now been out for 6 months. I'm starting to think, although they're saying that it'll still come out, I think it's irrelevant. I mean, I'm starting to think like, you know, enough of the boards in the retail channel that are B450 or X470 chipset and that have been discounted have been updated now with firmware. You know, in 3 months, I'm not sure what the relevance of B550 is going to be 9 months after the CPU is released. Like, there's something a little off there. So again, I'm disappointed, and I was wrong. I thought for sure, I predicted B550 would be there. I said that I was going to show you all the B550 motherboards, and there weren't any. Let's move on down the line. SSDs. Here was a big shocker. Samsung actually came out with a 980 Pro. Like, if someone had told me ahead of time that this was going to happen, I'd say, why are they going to bother? 980 Pro spec'd at 6,500 megabytes per second read and 5,000 write. That is very fast for a PCI Gen 4 drive, but I caught some that was really important in the spec sheet there. Coming out at only 250, 500 gigabytes and a 1 terabyte drive. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. I guarantee you something is wrong in Samsung's production process. They would not start a drive like that at 250 gigabytes if they could do anything else. They obviously can't hit 2 terabytes with what their firmware is not ready or something about their production. Of course, they control all the aspects of their SSDs, from the RAM to the controller, everything. They do it all, and they have no one else to blame but themselves that they can't go above 1 terabyte with their PCI Gen 4 drive when everybody else who launched in July went up to 2 terabytes. So they can only compete on price, and you know what? Samsung doesn't like to compete on price. So I assume that their 1 terabyte drive will come out in 3 to 6 months. Hopefully not 6 months. But the 980 Pro, they didn't have an availability or price date. I bet it's going to come in at $300 when all their competitors are at $200, and it's going to be 6 to 9 months late. So, more disappointment. On more exciting news, XPG sampled a new version, a new PCIe Gen 4 drive that hits over 7,000 megabytes a second. So they would actually be beating Samsung at their own game. That was just a prototype. They had a Crystal Disk Mark screenshot up top. You know, who knows if they're actually going to release that product. That would be blazingly fast and pretty much maxing out PCI Gen 4 bandwidth. It would be impressive if XPG did it. I'm going to return to XPG in a minute because they had some other big surprises. In terms of other SSDs, I asked Crucial, I asked Western Digital. If either of them had new high-end drives, neither one does. Okay, Western Digital has their black drive, which is a fine drive, but at this point it's a little outdated. And Crucial's top drive is the P1, which is a slow PCIe drive. It's fine at $100, but it's a slow drive. Neither of them had anything new. So it's Samsung and XPG or bust in terms of new drives coming out in the foreseeable future. RAM. This was kind of interesting. There were actually a lot of companies doing interesting things with RAM. Crucial is completely revamping its Ballistics line. It's actually canceling, EOLing all existing RAM under the Crucial Ballistics label. And they're coming out with new Ballistics RGB and RGB Max RAM. They're going to be able to hit 4,400 megahertz with RGBs, which is really hard to do because of the signaling issues. Those RGB lights actually take up some of the bandwidth that you otherwise would use for your RAM. So they say, hey, we've got it under control. We're one of the 3 big chip makers in the world, in addition to SK Hynix and Samsung. And we're the only ones that sell you retail RAM. So Crucial by Micron, the Ballistics RAM, expect good things from them with their new lineup coming in February. They're going to pull all existing RAM off the market and completely refresh their product line. And I think that's really exciting because they should have some faster RAM, and they can compete on price. They can compete better than any other manufacturers. Any of the A-Datas, the Corsairs, the G-Skills. Crucial makes their own stuff. So expect some good stuff from them coming very, very soon. That was very exciting. Other companies got in the mix too. Thermaltake has a whole line of RAM. I'm not as sure about them, in terms of long-term, whether or not they'll stick with it. Also saw some good stuff from HyperX. They were sampling a 4,800 megahertz kit that was a 4x16 gigabyte kit. So we're talking a whole lot of RAM, 64 gigabytes running at DDR4 4800. That was just a prototype, but that would be, I think, the fastest RAM kit on the market. So people are competing on looks with RGB and then also speeds. 4400 megahertz is looking like pretty standard, although some folks are having trouble getting that running with RGBs. I actually talked to Patriot Viper and they said, yeah, we can't actually hit 4400 megahertz and run RGB. So their fastest RGB RAM, I think, is 4000. So that was an interesting admission from Patriot Viper. I should say they also sampled some SSDs, and they said the same thing. They're very brutally honest. They're like, yeah, our SSDs are slower when we attach RGB lighting to them. So it's your choice. So I totally appreciated their honesty, but it's a little bit, I said, I'm not going to recommend that product then. You're like, okay, but it actually didn't even look that good. I hate to say it. XPG, if you want an RGB SSD, XPG has a better looking one, but I'm not going to be recommending them. How about cases? This is where people went wild. I went to Fantex, Coolermaster, Silverstone. Well, I did go to Corsair. They didn't have any. That blew my mind. Talk about surprises. Corsair didn't have any new cases on the market. I went to Be Quiet, which had a huge doozy of a surprise. So a lot of great new cases on the market. I actually held a poll on my channel here, and I asked what was the most exciting new case in the mainstream market, $100 to $200, and people overwhelmingly picked the Be Quiet PureBase 500 DX. Now, I called the PureBase 500 the best new case of 2019. The DX is the airflow model, and I actually asked, what does DX stand for? Why didn't you call it AF? And they said, well, DX stands for like deluxe, but you can just call it DX. That's their first airflow case, and it's a huge deal for Be Quiet, and they're basing it, thankfully, on a really good platform. The PureBase 500 is an awesome platform. I'm looking forward to testing that myself. They also added some adjustable RGB elements to the front. It looks like it's going to be super popular, and it's going to be, I think, $100 or $110. Can't quite remember, but really fair price. So I'm excited about Be Quiet entering the airflow market. I was very excited about Silverstone's Alta F1, which is their new Fortress case. The F in Alta F1 actually stands for Fortress, but they've actually revamped their entire case line, so they just have the Farah, the Seta, and the Alta. I should mention their first case, the Seta A1 I have here, and I finished my review of it. It will be coming on January 15th, so just in a couple days. So the Alta F1 is an awesome rotating 90-degree case for airflow. It comes from the bottom, goes to the top. I think it's awesome, and they're going to hit like $150 for a glass and aluminum enclosure. It is a really nice looking case. I just hope that they can execute. It was really just a prototype at this point. They don't even know which, if any, fans they're going to include, and it was a rough build. I handled it, and I could tell it wasn't quite fitting together. The seams weren't quite matching up. But the concept is really cool, and the price point's amazing. The reason they were able to hit a lower price point than their previous Fortress lines is that they've basically taken an existing chassis, literally one of their existing case chassis, their standard cases, and flipped it 90 degrees, and then wrapped it in aluminum and set it up for bottom to top airflow, chimney effect airflow. So that's how they save the money. There may be some drawbacks to that, and if I ever end up reviewing the Alta F1, I'll talk about this. Other cases I was personally excited about, the Fantex Eclipse, the P500, P500A. Looks awesome. I'm so excited. Last year they came out with the P600 Silent S, and I just didn't like the looks of it. And it was not a top seller, and they admitted that. It was not a big seller for them. The P500S is based on the same chassis, but has this great mesh airflow and cool ARGB effects with the fans in front. I should mention that there's, I mentioned the PureBase 500, I mentioned the P500A. There's definitely a movement back to airflow cases. Okay, after everyone started with those solid panels in front, and that was all the rage and in vogue, I think that a lot of these case manufacturers are moving back to airflow, but doing it a little bit more sophisticated, so it looks not so much like a mesh panel, but like a metal panel that's perforated. It sounds subtle, but they've really revamped the looks of that, so it doesn't just look like open mesh, like a tennis racket, okay? They've made these cases look really cool because there are more holes and they're smaller, so I think it looks a little better, and that's how they're going for 2020 with these airflow cases. Coolermaster had one as well, TD500 mesh, I believe. They're all doing the same thing, kind of tighter perforations so that front panel looks more attractive. So lots of really great cases in the ATX market. Also the ITX market. I'm really excited about Silverstone's SG14, but I'm actually even more excited about their ML10. This is something I've been asking for forever. Silverstone, please make a case that's just basically the size of the ITX motherboard. And they said, oh, we've got a few competitors. There's not a lot of room in that market. Antec and Inwin were the only two companies that made cases like that. I said, these are getting hard to get. Antec in particular, I think they've stopped production of their wonderful ISK 110 that I personally have and I've been recommending for years. I said, and they said, yeah, we saw that one of our competitors kind of left the market and we think there's an opportunity here for us with the ML10s. You could spin this the other way and say, the reason that Antec is leaving this market could be because it's not a good market. So we'll see. I hope they can sell a lot of their ML10s. And the one thing they've done that's really innovative is they're going to potentially offer 2 different height front panels and 2 different height the back panels. So you can decide if you want super slim or slightly taller to accommodate the AMD cooler, and or either an AMD 55mm Wraith Stealth cooler or a slot loading or tray loading DVD drive. Now they tell me that in Japan this is extremely important. The Japanese customers must have optical drive, like absolutely across the board. If they don't have an optical drive, the Japanese market won't buy it. So that's why that's actually was the main impetus for that. I said, you could also fit an AMD Wraith Stealth in there. Oh yeah, they said. So anyway, I thought that was a pretty ironic that they didn't think about the other application for a slightly taller mini chassis. But I'm really excited about the ML10. SG14, I think people are kind of mixed on the opinion of that, and I am frankly mixed as well. My favorite ITX case for a mini gaming PC is the SG13. It's what I personally use. It's what I've been recommending for years. This SG14 is basically in its 3rd iteration, and I'm just still not sure about it. I'm going to be honest. And I had given Silverstone my ideas long ago, like 6 months ago, about what that should look like, and it's not what they showed at CES. So, their choice. Other really cool mini cases. Inwin has their B1, which takes the basics of their BQS 656 and their Chopin, and basically gives you a tempered glass panel on top, and then vents out the sides in a really cool, rather than just having open mesh, they kind of made it a decorative venting, kind of like almost like blinds on a window. Really, I think it's a cool look, and creative way to handle airflow in a tiny case. There was also a very small case from Coolermaster, and when I walked in their suite, I said, hey, awesome, they're going to be coming out with a mini ITX case for gamers who want a compact chassis like all the Kickstarted cases out there that I know are very popular among a certain niche audience. But then I walked up to it, I said, is that an ITX case? Oh no, it's an Element H case. So they were the sole exclusive partner for the launch of Element H with Intel and their NC100, which does indeed stand for NUC 100. They told me they can't use NUC because trademarked by Intel, so the case is called the NC100, not the NUC 100. It's going to be coming out at $200. It's the launch partner with Intel for their NUC gaming. It's basically a modular system, so the CPU is on a daughter card and you plug it into the case. I'm excited for Coolermaster. I'm not that excited for a NUC gaming system. I don't think the CPU is going to have enough power. So, particularly at the prices Intel wants to sell it for. That's my opinion. Of course, no benchmarks yet, but my assumption is that it's going to be super niche and it'll be a short run for Coolermaster on its NC100. So, that's my opinion. In terms of other cases, I'm just going to mention one that blew my mind and everyone's mind. XPG came out with the Volta, which is this giant cylindrical case with airflow from the bottom to top, and it slides out. This thing looks awesome. I am not sure how practical it is, but I love the whole sliding mechanism, and it makes it look like it's some satellite or something. It was really, really cool, and XPG is trying to shake things up in the PC industry. They are going for broke. I mean, they even showed off a 24-karat keyboard. Like, serious. They were spending money on their marketing here at CES. I hope it doesn't come back to bite them because, they're kind of known as, like, they just make memory and SSDs, and then they're trying to come out with cases, coolers, the 24-karat keyboard, mice, headsets, all sorts of stuff. And, like, that's cool. You're trying to be like Corsair. I get it. Not everyone can do that. So, anyway, one last reminder to you all, Corsair had no cases at CES, and I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried about what's going on over there. I think they had some misfires, frankly, last year and the year before on their cases, and I think that's why they didn't bring anything to CES this year. Okay, so I've covered a lot of stuff. I'm not really going to cover power supplies. I didn't see anything tremendously interesting in the power supply market. Now everyone's kind of pushing limits a little bit higher. Going from, I saw an SFX power supply at 1,000 watts, or SFXL at 1,000 watts. Be Quiet has this new 1,500 watt titanium, but it's all kind of on the periphery. Like, I don't think it's just noise to me. Coolers. Whoa, Corsair came out with an air cooler. That blew my mind. The A500, first time in 8 years, Corsair is going to try to compete in this market. I do have a sample coming. I am going to give it a trial by fire. I'm going to put it up against all the coolers you expect me to put it up against, and I am not confident that it's going to win. There are other factors. You might say RGB, right? Shockingly, they did not include RGB. I asked at the press conference, why didn't you include RGB? And they said, well, we think that the market for high-end air coolers, the kind of people buying those, don't want the RGB. If you wanted RGB, you'd go with a liquid cooler at $100 or $120, like they offer some coolers. Actually, their brand new Pro XT doesn't have RGB, ironically, at $120, which is actually going to be a really high-performance liquid cooler. They're borrowing the internals from their Platinum line, which was their high-end line, which frankly cost too much because it had lots of RGB, and they're bringing it down to $120 for the 240, and I think $140 for the 280, which would be a really good price. Still has their magnetic levitation fans, ML fans. So that's actually what I think is really promising from Corsair in terms of cooling. Be Quiet has a few new coolers coming out at $40 and $50. We'll see how they do. I'm not sure that I'm going to sample them. Partly because I can't do that many cooler tests, and I do so many already. It's not going to be ready in time for this other test. So the last thing I'm going to mention are accessories. There was actually a lot of excitement in monitors. I am blown away by the Odyssey G9 from Samsung. Holy cow, that thing looks awesome. The specs are beyond belief. It's two 2560 by 1440 screens together, so it's like 5120 or something like that, and it looks awesome. They totally gamified it, but in a really classy way, like you might see in a sci-fi movie. It looks super awesome. I think it's hitting 240 hertz refresh rate. I mean, it's insane specs, and I've heard rumors $1,500 for that thing, and I believe it. I talked to some Samsung execs about that, and I said, you had the CRG 90 last year, which was, specs were really good, very similar, not quite as fast on the refresh rate, actually only 120 hertz, but they were shocked at how well that sold. That came out in August, and it was selling out every week. If you wanted a CRG 90, you had to back order it, because for months it was selling out. They were shocked. Samsung was shocked. They just didn't, frankly, they don't understand the gaming market, and they just put out a really good product, and were shocked that people wanted to buy it. Like, that's the honest truth. This time they're not going to be shocked. The Odyssey G9 is meant to sell, and that was by far the coolest monitor I saw. LG also had some cool monitors, but frankly they kind of blew it last year when they came out with their Ultra Gear monitor at CES and then didn't deliver it until December. Ooh, that rubbed people the wrong way. You lost some fans there, LG, and yeah, you had a new version of it, a FreeSync version this year that is has HDR 600 instead of HDR 400, and maybe it'll be a little cheaper than the $1,800 price point for last year's Ultra Gear 38. But you missed your opportunity. You misfired, literally. And they actually told me they put out a lot of stuff at the LG booth that's just kind of testing the waters, and these are prototypes, and they have no intention to bring this stuff to market unless the response is positive. So I think they blew it last year. Interesting, they also showed some OLED TVs that are designed to be used as monitors. So they had a 48-inch model and a 65-inch model, which are basically just their 65-inch. The 65-inch is just like their OLED, but I think design was slightly higher. Well, 120 hertz refresh rates and maybe better response times, tuned for gaming. I think the 48CX, which is the 48-inch model, is going to be really popular among people who want a really big screen on their desk. But don't want a 65-inch TV because that doesn't really work on a desk. I think people might dig that 48CX. No pricing and availability yet because frankly I think they're testing the waters. See, well, we're going to shrink down an OLED because keep in mind you can't buy OLEDs at 48 inches, right? It's 55 inches and up, and soon enough all TVs, all the high-end stuff is going to be 65 inches and up. So 48 inches, you get a really good TV that has G-Sync compatibility because of course LG adopted that in mid-2019. You get great response times, which is what OLED's known for. So that could be really promising. So that was really cool as well. I saw a couple monitors at Dell, but I wasn't as excited about those. Nothing really super new from them. So the other thing in peripherals, I was a little bit surprised that the big names came up empty-handed. Logitech announced nothing at CES. The big zero. They didn't have a single new product, not even in their Blue. I'm using a Blue microphone right here. You can see my Blue Yeti X box here. They didn't even have new microphones. And that's what they were promoting, Blue, which is they're really proud of that subsidiary. They bought that company out a couple years ago. They didn't have a single new product. Like, whoa, that's a misfire. Corsair, I was shocked they didn't come out with a new high-performance keyboard using their Slipstream wireless system that they use on their cheap mice, strangely, and their great headsets like the Virtuoso, which I recommend highly. The next step was obviously the Slipstream keyboard, and they just didn't have it. The next obvious step would be a Slipstream wireless mouse at the high end, not like a $50 mouse. They didn't have it. I was totally surprised. HyperX did come out with their CloudFlight S. The CloudFlight was an excellent headset released a couple of years ago. They're coming out with the CloudFlight S, which has 7.1 surround and a couple other features. They've enhanced the acoustics of it. And it also has Qi charging, which I think for some people might be a gimmick. For others, it might be cool. Of course, you need a Qi charger on your desk. It doesn't come with the Qi charger. They've built it, so the 7.1, their 7.1 implementations have historically been pretty bad, so it's not a huge selling point. The Qi charging is either going to be valuable to you or not at all. The problem is the $160 price point. I think that's too high. I think it's too high. When the Virtuoso comes in at $180, full metal construction, and the HyperX is loud and proud, all plastic. Now that makes it super light. It's going to be way lighter than its competition from Logitech and from Corsair. The CloudFlight, I held it. It's super light, CloudFlight S, but $160 is a lot to ask for when you really haven't upped the specs. You've just kind of thrown in some extra features. So I am going to be testing that. I'm going to be hopefully getting a review sample of that. So that was the big news from HyperX. They also have their new line of Aqua clone switches. They're still using Cherry for some of their older models, but their new models, they have probably as a cost saving measure, they have their new Aqua switches. Yeah, I'm not that excited about Cherry clones. Some of them are good. Logitech has some pretty cool switches in the G9 15 line, which I highly recommend. But I don't know. It didn't get me super excited. A big surprise came from Cherry, actually. They're coming out with their Viola low-cost mechanical switch. I think this could be really interesting. Not only, they said they're targeting all the membrane keyboards like Coolermaster and Razer came out with like mecha mechanical or mechanical, mecha membrane, all sorts of combinations of we've got a spring in there and it's not really mechanical. The Viola is going after them under the $100 price point for a high performance mechanical gaming keyboard. As I pointed out to them, there's a lot of Cherry MX boards that you can get already on discount under $100. And if the Viola is $100, it's not going to sell at all. You're going to be your own worst enemy on that. And then there are all those clones out there. So we'll see. But it was really big news and a big surprise to me. I had no idea that was coming from Cherry. They kept that under wraps really well. The last thing I want to talk about is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi 6 is coming, or it's actually here. A lot of high-end boards have Wi-Fi 6 now. A lot of the routers and even mesh systems. There were new mesh systems announced from a lot of the companies. I profiled with Netgear's and TP-Link's solution. But what I was most excited about is TP-Link's PCIe card for Wi-Fi 6. I'm super excited that TP-Link is still supporting the do-it-yourselfers out there who want an add-in PCIe card for their high-performance desktop PCs. It's like a forgotten market. Asus has one too, but it's $70. This Archer model from TP-Link is going to be $50. It just launched this week. You can get it. You can find it on Amazon now for $50. So that pretty much covers it. Please do like and subscribe if you like my content. I was out there working really hard for 3 days in a row, basically getting no sleep, so I could put up 10 videos each night after the show. I put out a total of, with this one, 40 CES videos, not even including my previews. I had a couple previews as well. 39 videos from the show floor and this summary video. I'm working hard to bring you all the news. Takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Please post your questions down below. I covered a ton of stuff. I'm eager to answer any questions you have, and also I can get those questions to the manufacturers if you want me to. Again, I'm Ari from the Tech Buyers Guru, and I will catch you soon.